So welcome everybody who's come to the webinar, Thriving Through the Decade of Disruption, as we've called it. So my name's Cameron Turner. I'm the entrepreneur in residence at the University of Queensland Business School, and we've started this series because we know that this crisis that we're through is in some senses not unlike other crises. Is whenever there is a major disruption, or sometimes it's referred to as a black swan event, we know that there are huge changes in the economy, not only in the economy, but in the social fabric. And what that does, and what we learned from the GFC, is that it, and I said this in my intro, my promo video, is that it opens up holes in the road, and that those holes just swallow entire companies and sometimes entire industries. But what we also know is that we get the emergence of a lot of new incumbents, a lot of new companies that just sort of pop up. And I guess as far as the UQ Business School goes, one of the leading business schools in Australia, is that what we wanted to try and do is provide an opportunity for people to really understand that change and crisis doesn't only have to be a negative thing. It will cause some negative implications, and we're all seeing that and experiencing that, and we'll probably see and experience that more. But it also is an opportunity to look at new things. And so really what I wanted to do today is I've invited Jim Kalokerinos. Jim is a very seasoned angel investor. He's also a seasoned entrepreneur. He's had some tremendous success with his own startups, and as a result of that, has subsequently gone on to invest prolifically in a number of startups, and particularly in the deep tech space. Jim's worked pretty closely with me. He's invested in 3 of my startup companies that have come out of the University of Queensland. He's invested in other University of Queensland startups, but has also invested very widely in tech-based startups. And so talking to someone who's actually been in this industry for a long time, I won't say how long, I think I've learned so much off of Jim, as he sits on the board of a company that I run, Progel, and I've just learned so much from him, and I just am so grateful for the opportunity to share some of those experiences with others around what are you really looking for as an investor in a startup when you're looking at making that decision, because we know it's hard to make that decision, and we know a lot of startups fail. So someone who's actually been doing it for a long time, what are you looking for? And also things around how do you know if an idea is a good idea, if a startup's going to be a good startup? So Jim, as I get started, I guess the first thing I want to ask you is because we know that so many startups fail, and I'm sure you've had plenty of experiences, maybe even in your own, I'm not sure, but I wonder if you can just talk to us a little bit about some of your early experiences in this idea of product market fit, because we know product market fit is the key to business success, or the key to product success. So the idea that you've got the right product or the right solution for the right customer that has the right problem, and we call that product market fit. So wondering if you can reflect on some of your early experiences of learning that lesson of either having or not having product market fit. Can you talk us through some of those early experiences where you experienced that?
Yeah. Thanks, Cameron, and thank you for inviting me to the webinar. And hopefully I can help out here a little. Yeah, look, product market fit is extremely important in looking at any new company, and even working from within a mature company. But look, I guess there's an important thing about product market fit. There's a lot of things that fit the market, their product, and they fit, like a lot of things have product market fit. But what a startup company has got to look for, and what an investor like myself looks for, is something that's unique, that's going to have product market fit. So, and we look at it as part of the concept. So, like if a company is manufacturing a widget, the proof of concept will be, show us how it works and that it does work. But the other part is show us how it fits into the market. So it's really part of the proof of concept. You've got the 2 parts. And, the other part, and as I said, it's best that it's unique. And I'll give a couple examples on some unique ones that I've been involved in the early days especially. But the part about establishing product market fit is that you've got to talk to the user, and you've got to talk to lots of them, lots and lots of users, or potential users, I should say. And your opinion on what they say can't be biased. So it's dangerous if you do it yourself, but sometimes you have to do it yourself. But if you're true to what they say, that's part of fitting it all together to get product market fit. But the other part that's required is cash. There's no point in having product market fit if you can't get anything going. So you need to have money. Now that can come from various sources, but I give you some examples. Look, one of my very first company, Tech Lab, there was 3 of us. It was in pathology distribution. And we knew a lot about the pathology market. We knew what the labs were using, what they were testing for, how they functioned. And we did that by visiting so many over the years. Now, we also established that there's the humble pass the pipette. It's called a transfer pipette or whatever. It used to be glass, and you stick it into a rubber bulb and you'd use it, right? Now there's tens of millions of those used every year throughout the world. Now back in the 80s, they were all glass, and we identified a need for plastic. And we also identified a source in America. Now, back in those days, in the 80s, manufacture of plastic moulding and manufacturing was very competitive in the US China hadn't gotten going. So we identified a place in Los Angeles, and we got some, and we got an exclusive agreement with this guy, and we brought him to Australia, and we knew we were going to do well. But we still went out and sampled them because we were funding this out of our pockets. There was no investors giving us money. We were funding it ourselves. So we probably invested maybe $30,000 or $40,000 in early money in those back in the 80s, and we got a lot of samples and we took them around. And we knew. Now, within 6 months, we were bringing in a container every second month, a 20-foot container. You imagine how many pasta pipettes fit in a 20-foot container? Now, that's product market fit. And we established it by talking to a lot of customers. Now, it was biased because we were doing the talking. We didn't hire anyone, but we knew we couldn't be biased because we had to fund it the right way. So we funded it from selling stuff. So we had a cash flow issue, but we went to the bank to cover for the cash flow because we were selling so much and we weren't getting the money in to cover for the debtors. So that's an example. It's a very simple product. It's unique and it got product market fit. Another one I could think of a little bit later in a second company, we actually in my third company, again with some other guys, a company called PanBio. Now, PanBio, a lot of people know PanBio because of dengue fever, but that's not the exciting part that got it going. It was Ross River virus. And again, because we knew the labs, because we set up PanBio, manufacturing and research company, as well as sales. But we again came from a background of sales and marketing, and we knew what the labs wanted. And back in those days, we knew that they needed to have a method to test Ross River virus and Barmah forest, because at that time they were sending it to one lab per state, not a government lab. And it was a microplate method, and we knew how to put it together. So we knew where all the microplate readers were in Australia, and we put together an IgG and IgM antibody test for Ross River virus and Barmah forest. Again, it took off big time. Again, we funded it. We had to do a lot of the work ourselves to get it established as a going concern. So that meant building up a big manufacturing facility, but we funded that ourselves because we knew we had product market fit. So that's a couple of examples. I've got some negative ones too, if you want to hear them.
Yeah, well, I guess I'd be interested because and you sort of danced around this idea of what we call confirmation bias, which is sort of going out to getting evidence, but not being objective enough. And that's a really easy trap for inventors and for entrepreneurs and even just companies to fall into. Whether you believe your own spin or you're eating your own dog food. I guess I'm wondering, Jim, whether you had an experience, not necessarily where you had confirmation bias, but something where you thought as a company this was going to be a winner, and it just wasn't. And what did you learn from that?
Yeah, well, yeah, confirmation bias normally comes if it, as I mentioned, if you're doing the surveys, but you can mitigate against it if you're paying for it, right? So you're going to be very honest with yourself when it's your money. And this was our money. We didn't have shareholders. It was 3 guys put the money in, right, in those days. So we weren't going to be biased at all because it was the end of us if we made a mistake. A company. I was involved in a company with in asthma inhalers. Now that suffered from confirmation bias. We had a really neat product, proof of concept. It worked beautifully, and we actually showed it to consumers because it was a consumer product. You put an asthma inhaler in it, and it was a neat way of protecting the mouthpiece. It's a bit hard for me to explain. I'd have to show it to you, but it was really quite nicely put together, and the users all liked it, and we were blinded by that. We thought, oh, well, they all like it. So all we now need to do is go and find some companies to buy it from us and sell it to these users. Well, that's not that easy because we're running a B2B model and the consumers are B2C. Now, if you're going to be a business to consumer, you've got to have a lot of money. And we had raised money. In fact, there was a VC involved with us and the early investors. We'd sunk in several $1 million. I can't remember the exact amount, but it was in the millions. And we came up with the fact that we didn't do it correctly on the survey in how, I mean, can you imagine a person going into a pharmacy to buy a product? Now, how many products are in the pharmacy? There must be tens of thousands. Now, they don't even know that they're going to be looking for this product because we don't have the marketing message to tell them to go and find this product. We had a product that they saw. When they saw it, they liked it. But that's the people we showed. The bias we had was we didn't understand that we should have done the correct marketing to show that to all people coming into the store. Now, to do that was going to cost far more than we had funds, and the product failed. So that's an example of where we were blinded by people telling us what we wanted to hear, but not knowing how to get to them through the pharmacy.
Yeah.
We tried to do B2B to sell it to some of the big pharma companies, and they were more interested in therapies rather than the device. They didn't see a big win for the device. They would rather have a drug that they could do better with.
Yeah. And I think, Jim, that's such an interesting lesson that you learned. Obviously, you're an investor in the company, so it can be a painful lesson, but I think it's so interesting to know that even people that experience can, because I mean, in some senses, you did have evidence that people wanted it, but they weren't actually your customers. And your point around having a B2C model, a business to consumer model, needing to have a huge amount of money is really important because that can be sometimes very hard to raise when you haven't got anything. We've got no revenues, no proof. Someone's asked a question, and just for other people, feel free to drop a question in the Q&A section. Someone's asked a question around this. You mentioned sort of in your first example, the 2-step process of identifying the need and then the proof of concept. And just interested in if you can talk through that a little bit in terms of that two-step process. Is that something that you do sort of sequentially, or is it sometimes that happens sort of in the other way around, or is it sort of all happening at the same time?
Well, you know, I get attracted to making an investment if the product looks good, right? But I also very quickly need to know that that it works and that there is a market for it. And I also need to know who's driving it. So the process, there are a few steps. An early step is there is a concept that the product will work. But as I mentioned, that's only part of it. You've got to know how to scale it, how to sell it out there. And that just because it works doesn't mean people are going to buy it. That MediStream in Hara I told you about, it worked. It worked fantastically. No one was buying it because we didn't know how to get it out there. So if you're looking at any investment, you've got the product and you've got to know that it scale, manufacture and go out into the market. And that sort of stuff comes from having some good guys behind the company. So you just don't have someone who's knocked up, oh, this is a great idea. You've got to know how to take it further. So you've got to have people behind the company that know how to do that understand what drives, you know, the driver in that particular market that product is associated with.
Yeah.
So they'll know that. And so you're looking at both the management and the product.
And I guess that's what's interesting there is this what you sort of referred to is how do you identify that need? And you could identify the need in all of your companies because you were in deep connection with a lot of these industries, a lot of these players, and you saw that need sort of emerging because you were already in there. It wasn't just something you just thought up, you know, while you're in the shower on the Sunday morning. And so you actually, and that's quite often what we see is the most successful entrepreneurs are people that have got, you know, 20 or 30 years of domain experience. They've seen something, they've seen some problems, they know that is a problem and they haven't been able to find a solution. And so ultimately it's those people that are more successful because they've actually got empathy with the problem. They've seen the idea of the problem and then they've actually tried to work out how to solve that problem as opposed to just someone who comes up with a cool idea. Jim, you talked about this idea about the team and the idea. There's often a dialogue that goes along. So what's more important, you know, the jockey or the horse, you know, the idea or the entrepreneur? So there's some thinking that people, there's an old venture capital saying that says that I'd rather back a good team than a good idea because a good team will find a good idea. I'm not sure that I really necessarily agree with that, but I'm interested in your thoughts, Jim, because you've invested in so many companies. I'm sure you probably haven't invested in companies that have really rubbish teams, but just interested in some of your thoughts around, you know, how do you get into a new business? You know, how important is the jockey and how important is the horse?
Yeah, well, I'd have to say 100% I've never invested first up on a team, on a jockey. I've always invested, let me rephrase it. I've started the investment by looking at the horse. The horse has got to pass, you know, muster with me. And then I very quickly look at the team, the jockey. The horse comes first, then the jockey. Now, if there's been lots of good ideas or good horses that I've not invested in because I've then decided the jockey or jockeys were not worth it and it was just going to come to heartache. So I think it's important that I get attracted by the product, then I look at the whole picture. And I look at product and the jockey, at the horse and the jockey, and the way I look at them, I look at how attractive they are and what their probability of success is. So for example, a jockey who's got sector experience has got a high probability of success. Someone who understands the market drivers has got a good probability of success. Someone who's just new and is going to try to learn it, less success probability. A product that's unique and addresses all the competition in a positive way, it's got a good probability of success. So I'm attracted to products that have a global market. So there's, you know, it all comes down to attractiveness and chance of success, and then you go from there.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I liked what you said to my class last year when you were talking about this is you know, it's the jockey that sort of gets your attention, because I mean, they're the one talking to you, but it's the horse that gets your money. But obviously they've still got to be a good jockey. So I think that picture is actually was really helpful for me to understand the role of that entrepreneur. Can you tell us about perhaps a time where you've made an investment and you really, the product market fit just started to explode? How do you, when you're making that investment decision, how do you really get that idea about, get that confidence, I guess, that the product market fit is there? Can you give me an example of when one of your investments, it just all worked and it just made so much sense?
Well, going back to that Ross River virus, I mean, when we ran out of stock on our first manufacturing run within a couple of weeks. So you know you've got it when you just sell out. Now, people say it's bad planning. Well, you know, how well do you plan a brand new product in the sector? Now, so you get a big bang just by looking at the sales numbers, which is the best way to look at product market fit. How quickly it gets taken by the customer. I remember when I was, I used to run Asia Pacific for a company called Quidel, who are a very big diagnostics company now in the United States. And I set up with their influenza business, Flu A, Flu B, in Japan, with a pharma company called Sumitomo, who are a very big company. And I coordinated all that with them and we got it going. Now, we ran out of influenza A, B testing product within 2 weeks of launching. We had done so much prepping after we did all the prepping as we're getting a regulatory approval. Now, we had something like 2,000 doctors ordering, because this is a product done in the doctor's office or beside the doctor's office, a bit different to what they do in Australia. Now, there was such a demand, we couldn't keep up. But even if we predicted it, they wouldn't be able to make enough product in the US because they were covering their market as well. So again, the bang, the big hit was just mind-blowing. Now, it took us 3 months to catch up. But what can you do? You don't not launch the product, and everyone knew that we were doing the best we could. And we went on to be, we remained market leader in Japan for several years after that, because we had a very good product, and the market fit that we identified was it had to be fast, had good specificity and good sensitivity, and it had all of that. There were 4 competitors at the time, and they didn't have any of that. So the uniqueness, as I talked about earlier, was the speed and not foregoing any accuracy. We could denote, this is back, 10 years ago, we could diagnose flu A and B in like 5 minutes on an antibody test. It was a really powerful test, and we knew it. But so it was a big hit. Yeah.
So Jim, just interested in any thoughts, because I know you've invested in a lot of university tech startups, you know, and so I'm just wondering, any thoughts on how do you make that decision when they're pre-revenue, or they're not even anywhere near being able to sell? So obviously product market fit is easier to see when you've got sales data, but if you're, you know, maybe years before revenue, before sales, how do you actually get that feel, that confidence that there is some resemblance or some potential of product market fit?
Look, I'm an investor in, a group of us from Brisbane Angels are investors in Vaxxus, which is a fantastic University of Queensland product. Now, it's certainly not out there yet, but when you look at their technology, you've got a sense that it will have product market fit. the reason we invested was that we knew there'd be a lot of capital to go in. In fact, when we put in our first round, there were 3 venture capitalists, 1 Ventures and 2 American ones that invested into that UniQuest product. Now, there was also people like Merck who were looking at it, and CSL. A lot of people, and you just knew from all of that activity that there was definitely going to be product market fit in the longer term. Now, the fact that we knew there'd be money to fund it because of all the interest was what made us go that way. I mean, there's not many angel investors around that invest in vaccine platforms. Vaccine platforms is like a 20-year journey in some cases. Now, for us to do that, it was because we could see that it was one day it'll go. And, you know, and they've been doing all the right things since then. There are other competitors on the vaccine patch test. You know, as you know, vaxxers have a vaccine patch. There are other vaccine patches out there. But the other part that they identified early and that got us on board was they knew that if they're going to become a vaccine platform, they had to be able to scale it. So they can scale that product big time. And they are several years ahead from what I've heard from some of the pharma companies in the way that that product will go to the market because they can scale it and they can make it at a very good price. So that's an example of a university product. Another one might be, as you know, I'm a very keen investor in Perky. Now, Perky came out of Progil, and Cameron, you'll remember when that was never supposed to happen. We were going to do the Progil technology and sell it to one of the drinks companies. Well, they told us, no, we'd rather see you make it. And they wanted to see proof of commercial concept, right? So we got involved in doing that. Now, the company has gone on since then, and there's been a lot of money invested. Uniseed and high net worth investors and Brisbane Angels have definitely gotten behind the company, and it's heading in the right direction. It is now into revenue, but when we were putting the early money in, it was pre-revenue, but we had a good feeling because we had done some homework with the customers, with the consumers, and we knew that there would be money coming. So we went. Now, still being fine-tuned, selling probiotic water is a complicated business in various markets. We're fine-tuning on where it goes to, but it's definitely heading in the right direction. And that's another example of
no, that's great. And I think in some sense we talk about this as being, product market fit, is when the dogs are eating the dog food, the dog food's pretty good. And I think what I liked about that is you can either have, the dogs being potentially the customers or the consumers or the customers. You've got to be careful if it's the consumers, if you don't have a B2C model. So the customers who actually, you're going to have a relationship with, but it also can be the investors. So if there's a whole heap of sharks circling around, if there's a whole heap of dogs sniffing around this opportunity and they're high quality credentialed sort of investors, that gives you confidence. And that's the idea. If only one person's thinking of investing in this and no one else wants to invest, then it gets a bit of a smell around it that maybe even though I think it's a good idea, no one else seems to. And often that famous saying that if everyone around you is losing their head and you're keeping yours, then maybe you don't have a full grasp of the situation. I'm gonna open the floor to some questions in a minute. So if anyone who's listening has got a question, just type it in the Q&A box. But lastly, Jim, I want you just to refer to the moment we're in at the moment with this coronavirus and the disruption that we're seeing. For you as an investor, do you see this, because you're an investor in a lot of companies, do you see this as an opportunity where if you've got an idea, if you've got a startup idea, or even if you're an SME or a startup yourself existing, is this an opportunity to sort of put the foot down and try and accelerate and grow because of this disruption? Or is this a time, in terms of giving some advice, where you should maybe just stand back and just see what happens in the landscape and just wait till things fall out? What would be your advice to people either in big companies or even in startups or pre-forming a startup? What's your advice?
Yeah, look, I'm tending to be conservative with this at the moment. Now, look, the advice I'd be giving a startup is obviously raising money at the moment is very tough. I mean, all the valuations are going to be stressed. I mean, the people with money have got such a choice. So the valuation is going to be stressed. Doesn't mean the company's stressed. The business model doesn't have to be, is not stressed, but the valuation will be. So that means it's not a good time to raise money. Now, if you have money, I'd be careful in preserving it as best you can to make sure that you get through to your next inflection point. So basically, you've really got to earn the right to survive after the COVID-19 goes away. If you blow your money during COVID-19 and you can't get any more, you haven't earned the right to go after. So I'm a big believer, you've got to earn your rights to perform in a later world. Now, the companies that will do that are going to have the right business model. So, for example, I'm involved in a company called Inter Healthcare. It's an allied health roll-up. Now, it's got a fantastic business model. I could spend ages telling you about it, but I haven't got the time. Now, that's a company that we know by bunkering down, we will go on to fight some really great days in the future. Whereas if I was running an airline company, right, or a tourist, something in the tourist industry, I'd be very, very cautious about the future. There's going to be a bit of realignment there. So I guess what I'm saying is bunker down, get through this, and if you've got X amount of cash that goes wide distance, get that same amount of cash and go twice as far if you can. Because when you come through, you want to be coming through to raise more money at a better valuation. And that's so important, or else you'll really stumble. Now, you talked about taking opportunities in distressed times. Well, talking about the allied health care company I'm involved in, Inter Healthcare, that's exactly what we are doing there. But you know what? We're doing it because we've got private equity and 2 private banks behind us. We have cash to get through COVID, right? It's a matter of how we might come out of it. We're definitely going to come out of it stressed. We're down on what our predictions were, but we're going to come out of it, and we have the cash to go out on some M&A, right? So there are, where you do have the cash and you know you'll come through, you can do it. But some startups don't have positive cash flow, and that's dangerous. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's great, Jim. I'm just going to quickly share a screen as we sort of wrap things up, because I guess I want to draw attention to the audience that UQ Business School is really trying very hard to provide some support to the community broadly. And so a couple of things we've done is we've released a couple of short courses, community courses, and normally these things have a significant fee attached to them. So we've actually reduced a number of those down to about $8, which is just the admin fee. So if any of you are interested in understanding more about innovation or entrepreneurship or design, lean startup sort of methodologies, then feel free to log on to this website, community courses under the business website within UQ Business School. And also, if for those of you that haven't done an MBA, I would encourage you to think about doing an MBA. I think we've seen a lot of interest coming in the MBA program because people are now recognizing they need some new skills. And so there is an information night in our MBA program. One is tonight, a Q&A session tonight, and another one on the 20th of May. So again, have a look at the UQ MBA if there's something that piques your interest, because I think what we're seeing is that people are recognizing that the world is changing and it's going to change very, very quickly. And what we know is that people that are successful are people that have got the right skills. And as Jim, you've talked about, having the right capability, the right integrity, the right business skills, business model thinking, innovation thinking is going to be the key to unlocking value. So I might draw it to a close there, Jim. I'm so appreciative of you spending some time with us. You've had enormous experience in this space. Certainly, I appreciate everything I've learned off of you, and I think the audience today has learned a lot of some of those experiences. And I know, Jim, you talk to our MBA classes. I teach the entrepreneurship capstone in the MBA program and the entrepreneurship and innovation masters at UQ. And Jim, you've been very generous coming and talking to our classes, and that's one of the great things about our program is we get people like you to come and talk to us. So even though this COVID thing's a disaster, it's great to be able to get these messages out. So Jim, I just want to finish by saying thank you so much for your experience and for all the investments you're making in a number of UQ startups and for the contribution you're making to us as startups. So thanks, Jim. Appreciate your time, and look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody, and see you next week, next Thursday or next Friday for a session with Rezat, Tony Keating, the CEO of an ASX-listed startup company out of UQ. So thanks for your time, and we'll see you around the traps. We'll see you at the UQ MBA Information Evening. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.